Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. It is the 11th of August, and it's early in the morning. I can't spend much time out here because yesterday's heat index was 110. It's going to be pretty much that today. Anyway, we have problems. This time we have problems, okay? And right here in River City, yeah, we got trouble. We got trouble right here. After I ran the engine for quite a while, all of a sudden water started pouring out of the bottom. Now I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, hey, that's not supposed to do that. Old man Murphy, he paid an extended visit this time. He visited us 3 times. The first time was the water. The second time, the charging system's not working for the battery. So it could be a bad alternator or just some rusty connections on the alternator, whatever. And one more thing, our master cylinder right there, that main line that goes out to the front brakes right there, it's leaking right there. So I'm going to have to reflare that and do that. Okay, so what's the priority here? Well, the priority is the water. Let me tell you, I'll give you a quick explanation of what I saw, what I did, and where we're at. Now, fortunately, for those of you who have never worked on a car or a hobby car or anything like that, a lot of you would say, oh my God, that's terrible. No, it's not. Now we're getting into the real fun part. All this other crap has been for safety reasons. I've replaced this for safety, that for safety. Everything was geared towards safety. Now we're getting into the meat of the matter, the engine. And there's an issue. I'm not even going to call it a problem anymore. It's just a big issue, okay? Now, here's what happened. When I filled the engine, or you fill an engine that's had the water drained out of the radiator, and you put the water in, after the engine warms up, the water begins to rise. Now this is in any car, especially the older types, the water rises and rises and rises. This is, now keep in mind, your thermostat down here, it allows the water to go from the radiator to the engine. It's closed. And mine was, what was it, 180 degrees, 190 degrees? I think it was 190 degrees. So when the engine hit that 190 degrees, it opened up, the water went in, but before it did, the water rise and rise and rise, and whether it's in one of these or a regular radiator, doesn't matter. And it'll eventually, with the cap off, it'll boil over to the top a little bit, and then finally the thermostat will open up and it'll suck the water down into the engine and start cooling the engine. Then you, of course, have to add additional water to get it up where it needs to be. Well, that's exactly what happened with mine. Everything functioned normally, it was just perfect. Yeah, except when the water started running out of the bottom. And I'm like, this is going to be fun. So the first thing I had to do was inspect the entire, I mopped everything up, dried the floor off with the fan overnight, and then got underneath and inspected the engine. It's up on jack stands again right now. I thought maybe a freeze plug had rusted through or blown out. That was my first, because I really couldn't figure out where it was coming from. There was so much water under here. By the time I got down here to look, it was just everywhere. So where's it coming from? Don't know. So all the freeze plugs were good. I went ahead and I looked for cracks maybe in the side of the block. I don't know what the history of the engine is. I don't know what the history, the exact history. No cracks. The freeze plugs were good, and I didn't see any water leaking around the heads, any gaskets anywhere. Obvious water dripping down, along the side of the, around the spark plug area here, and along the side of the engine block or on the floor there. So now I'm really, what's going on here? So then I said, well, maybe it's the heater core. Well, it turns out the heater core inside the car was dripping a little bit, but not to the extent that of the water I was getting. So I went ahead and bypassed it, bypassed the heater core by taking the hose that went down here. It came off of this little baby right here, and I just looped it around and put it back in here. So now the water will be pumped out and right back around, whereas normally the heater core was in the center, like right here, okay, being controlled by a valve, opening and closing it. But, so I this thing here was not connected after I disconnected it from that thing right there I just told you about. This baby here. I decided to do a pressure check before I connected it back up here. So I plugged off this. This was off. The metal connector on the end of this square block was exposed, but I went ahead and blocked the hose off, put a clamp around it, and then I took my air compressor. I have a little air thing here. I took the pressure down to 25 psi, and it's got a rubber tip. And I stuck it in there like that. Now the engine was not running during any of this. Okay, the battery was out, and I pushed it up in there, and then I just gently, put about 25 psi into there, and it held. There was no escape of any air anywhere. And then when I released it, slowly backed it off, the air came blowing back out. So what did that tell me? Well, that told me that the water jacket inside the engine and all the other areas that the water touches, was good. Everything was sealed. So the leak was not coming from here back. Now that was kind of nice. Now let's move on to the next part. Now you'll remember I told you that when the engine heats up to a certain water temperature, and whatever temperature that thermostat is, mine being 190 degrees I believe, it opens up and lets the water go down through. Now prior to the thermostat opening up, the water just sat there. I filled it up to about right here, just slightly below this line, this seam. By the way, this is called in the manual, this is not an expansion tank, it's a water resupply tank, okay? A resupply tank. Anyway, the water just sat there. It didn't go anywhere, it didn't leak. So I had an engine that didn't leak air. I had this portion right here that didn't leak any water. None of the hoses were leaking from the radiator or the transmission lines. Anything around there that is associated with the water was still good. But then when the water got hot and the thermostat opened up, the water went into the engine, and that's when it started pouring water out of the bottom of the motor. So what could it be? What could it be? The engine block's good. This part is good. The thermostat was good because it opened up at its proper temperature and allowed the water to go in. What's left? What is left? The radiator was not leaking. The hoses were not leaking. The transmission lines going into here were not leaking. What's left? The water pump. I can't see it though. The problem is, I think, see, here's your water pump, that big old blue thing. This is your water pump right here, this big old sucker. Now, on the back of the water pump is a plate that seals it up with a gasket. The water was not leaking from where the water pump attaches to the block. Get this light where it's supposed to go. Come on now. It was not leaking down there on this side where it bolts to the engine block, and it was not leaking on the other side where it bolts to the engine block, which I can't see right now. However, and I just couldn't see any water coming from it at all, so that was a real perplexing problem, But by the time I get down there to look around, there's so much water everywhere. Again, it's very difficult. I'm by myself. If I had somebody to help me, it would have been okay. But it's got to be the water pump. The backing plate on the water pump, I think, is either rusted through or the gasket has come loose. I don't know. Could be a crack. I don't know. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to move this garbage and get down there and remove that water pump. Now I have to put a caveat here. Brendan says, you really shouldn't remove that water pump until you're 100% sure. Well, I'll tell you what, let's make a declaration. I'm 100% sure. So that's what's going on with that. Anyway, once I get that done, then I'll go ahead and put the battery back in. I charged the battery. It's completely ready to go again. And before I put the battery in, though, I'll remove all the contacts down here, all the connections, all the everything that's connected to the rear of the alternator that feeds up to it feeds up to this fusible link, and it feeds up to the to this baby right here, the solenoid, and then the battery, and we'll make sure everything is right. I got the schematic in the shop manual. So that's what's going on for now, guys. I was hoping to finish this baby up and be rolling down the road, but it's just not going to happen. Old man Murphy said no. So anyway, we'll cut this video off here. It's a quickie one, a short one, and until next time you see it, I'll have it all torn apart. In the next video, I'll let you see what we find. And then if it is a water pump, they sell them fairly cheap. Do you know that some guys on eBay are actually selling a water pump for this engine for $550? Hey, that's insanity to the max. Whereas you can go to places like Rock Auto and get one for 30 bucks, you know, like $550. These people are nuts, some of them, I swear. Anyway, we'll see you next time. I'll let you know what's going on. Well, welcome back to the Murphy Show. Here's the big plan. The big plan for removing the water pump is to do it without removing the radiator or the, I guess this is the condenser or evaporator. I don't know what they call this thing. I'm not an air conditioning guy. I'll be soon learning about this, but there's a air conditioning radiator of some kind down in there. You see it down in there? That's not the radiator, that's the air conditioning. It's bent. This car's been in an accident, like I said, the front fender, and it bent that, but apparently it's still holding. So anyway, the idea is to remove the, I'll have to take the fan belts off. I got to take this shroud off. By the way, this shroud is very important to you 66 and 64 and 65 owners who have air conditioning in your car. Don't, you know, if you break the shroud in an accident or something, don't go without it if your car is air conditioned. This thing is designed to create more airflow through the radiator and the evaporator down there, condenser. I think it's a condenser. Is to allow more, you know, keep air confined so it keeps things cooler. If you go without it, it'll still, you know, things will still work, but your air conditioner will not work as efficiently. And it says so right in the shop manual. If you have an air conditioner, make sure this goes back on, or you find a replacement if it's broken. Let's keep tearing. We're getting ready to lift the water pump out. It's all loose. The brackets have been removed that hold the air conditioning, air compressor, and the alternator, and all that crap. Everything's loose. The hoses, the works. So it's already dropped down, as you can see. There's a separation between the gray block area and the blue. There's a gasket there. I don't know. This is one of these go for broke, but you know, the bottom line is, even if it turns out not to be the water pump, all it's going to cost me is a couple of gaskets to put it back together. $1.50 maybe, I don't know. Let's get it out of there. Well, there she is, folks. It doesn't look all that bad. This is where the at the bottom of your water pumps, when the seal and everything goes bad in the shaft down here, they'll start leaking through that hole. Every water pump has a hole like that, and this is on the bottom, of course. It sits like this, it'll be on the bottom. So when the seal and everything breaks, there's a seal and a bearing in here, and when it goes bad, it lets you know by pouring water out that, what they call, I guess it's kind of like a weep hole. That's what we call it. So I don't know, there's quite a bit of rust in this area. Now let's look at the plate on the back. Now, this is the top of the plate. This is that thing I replaced a while back, or when I first got the engine. We put that bypass hose in there. We'll be able to put in a nice complete length of bypass this time instead of shortening it up. And here's the bottom, where there's quite a bit of rust right through here. This is that plate I was telling you about. I'm going to go ahead and take these off. I've already got it in my mind to go ahead and just buy another one for 30 bucks. This looks like original stuff dating back to 1966. And I'm going to look at it a little closer, see if there's anything on it that says Ford Motor Company anywhere or whatever. But I think it's been leaking through here. However, I don't think it's been leaking to the extent of the water I was getting. I mean, I was getting a bucket full of that water. I'd pour it in the radiator, the supply tank on the top, and it would just run right out the bottom. So I don't know. Let's take a look at the engine. Well, there we are. This is, one side's the inlet and the other side is the outlet, which is over here. All it does is pump water. It's got a little impeller in the middle of it, in the middle of the pump, and it just pumps water from one side to the other. That's all it does. Any excess water that can't be used gets pushed back through this overflow or bypass pipe back into the water jacket. That's it. The problem is you got to remove, half the engine in order to get to it. But that's the fun of it. I enjoy that kind of stuff. I see no cracks, no breaks, no anything. But I'm going to go ahead and continue to eyeball it. I'll tell you what, let's just keep rocking and rolling here. Since my son was kind enough to buy me this Chemo power battery operated ratchet a while back, I haven't even had time to use it. So let's just do it. Let's see if this will work. Gotta break it. It's going to take 2 hands. Let's take my ball peen hammer now. Hammer it down through there, the screwdriver. See if we can't knock that plate off. We'll show you what's inside a water pump. That's what they look like. That's what they look like. Just an impeller that goes round and round. That's what makes the water go through your motor. Takes it in one side, puts it out the other. The input to it is this large heater hose, radiator hose that comes out of the radiator, and then it goes down in there and just circulates it around. Bada bing, bada boom, and it's all done. Now what do I see on the gasket? Okay. I'm concerned about the bottom of it. I don't know. Let's zoom in here and get a close-up. I don't see any problem. I don't see where any water's been leaking through either. I don't know. That's really weird, isn't it? Where is that water coming from? I'd have sworn it had to have been here. I'm sure it wasn't this, I know some of you probably noticed this already, but it wasn't from there. It wasn't from that thing right there. That was a heater hose. It was disconnected. And we were still getting water. I don't know. Well, I guess I'm going to have to do some more eyeballing. And I don't like this water pump anyway. It's probably old. Just another excuse for me to buy a new part. You betcha. Wifey will be so happy. Well, there's one positive thing from all this. Finally, the old garage is starting to look like a real garage. Now we got engine parts laying here, there, and everywhere, to include the fan blade. And this clutch, we need to talk about that clutch later on. That's a some kind of weird device clutch. They've got oil in them, I think, or something. I need to do a little more studying on that. And I'll have an answer for you by the end of this video. But that fan shroud's in good shape. I was glad to see that. Yeah, of course we had our, our proverbial mud wash nest, obligatory. Got to have that no matter what I take apart. There's another one down there at the bottom of the shroud. All right, I like it now. This is the kind of work I much prefer to do over working on front end stuff. This is my forte. I like tearing stuff apart and then making it work. Let's wrap this mess up with this clutch. I said I would. I've never seen anything like this, and I don't know how it works other than what it says in the book. They're called bimetal. Let me see what the exact name is on. They're called fluid coupling. It's a fan drive clutch. It's a fluid coupling containing silicon oil. Now I imagine silicon oil is down in here somewhere, and there's 2 different kinds. One is a flat bimetal spring in the middle, right there. And the other one is a flat coil bimetal spring in the center, which is the one we have. There's the flat coil bimetal spring. Now supposedly, as they heat up, they go faster. And some kind of mechanism here involved in the center where there's this oil. I guess this thing heats up, causes something in the center here to move, allowing fluid to do something inside this mess right here. But as it cools down, the fan goes slower. That's all I know about it. To tell you the truth, I'm not really much interested. But I just thought this was cool. I wanted to look at it because it's all self-contained. You can't do anything about it anyway. Can't fix it. When it goes bad, you just got to throw it away and get another one. Now, this is on the Thunderbird here, but keep in mind that Thunderbird has a 390 in it. 390 cubic inch engine, and I would imagine the 428s also have that. So if you have a Ford 390 of any year, it probably has this sort of thing on it, unless it's just strictly for the Thunderbird. I have no idea, but it would seem to me if it's on my 390 in the T-Bird, it'll be on your Ford Fairlane 390 as well. So that's all we know. It's a fan drive clutch fluid coupling. And it contains silicon oil. Fan speed is regulated by the torque carrying capability of the silicon oil. The more silicon oil in the coupling, the greater the fan speed, and the less silicon oil, the slower the fan speed. Now that makes absolutely zero sense to me, but that's okay. It's in here somewhere, I guess, all sealed up. They knew what they were doing. The engineers did. I'm not an engineer. Okay, until further notice, we're going to stop right there. I don't think I'm going to change my mind again. So until next time, this is John.